So the microphone doesn't work, so I'll just speak really loudly. But I'll call this meeting to order at 8:04 p.m. Thank you for everyone for joining us on a Sunday evening. So we'll begin with roll call. Myself, I'm present. Our external vice president, Taylor Valmorris. Executive Vice President Taylor Valmorris.
Here.
Our Vice President of Campus Internal Affairs, Michael Urban.
Here.
Our Vice President of External Affairs, Summer Schaefer, is coming late. Our Vice President of Finance, Shafi Karim.
Here.
Our Outreach Director, Kevin Chow. Our Personnel Director, Emily Yang, is excused absent. Our Marketing Director, Catherine Chang, is excused absent. And our Elections Director, Melina Reyes, present. And our Transfer Non-Traditional Student Director, Eric Khan, is excused absent. Okay. So now we'll move into the approval of the agenda. The agendas, I believe I put on that front table where some of our judicial council members are sitting. There should be a couple extra copies. So if anyone in the gallery would like to have an agenda, that's where you can get them. Can I get a motion? Taylor?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda. I move to cross out office reports after public forum, item 5, and replace it with judicial report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Michael. And all in favor? Great. So that's 301. So all in favor of approving the provided agenda?
Yeah. I move to approve the perfected agenda.
Is there a second? Second by Shafi Karim, and all in favor? Thank you. Okay, so next on the agenda, we'll move into public forum. So if anyone from the public would like to say anything, you can come up to the podium. Great. Oh, it's and please state your name and also write it down for our records, please.
Okay, for sure. My name is Ara Myra-Payton. I'm a student. Sorry, I'm just write this down real quick. Is there like an amount of time that I have, or?
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Dear members of the gallery, I would like to start off by saying that I'm not here to beg for re-elections to not happen, but I just spent the last 3 weeks in intense campaigning mode, going for up to 12 to 14 hours a day and talking to hundreds of voters, along with balancing an on-campus job and classes. I know I'm not only speaking for myself when I say that I'm exhausted from elections. However, I am confident in my party and the platforms we ran on, and I would proudly run with them all over again should the need arise. But I don't think there is a need. In my personal opinion, and this is based on what I've seen from experience, UCR's justice system is comprised of 2 types of judges. Those who merely interpret the Constitution, and those with political agendas who attempt to create legislation. What we have here in this re-election situation is a classic example of judicial activism. With the power to interpret in their hands, the justices made a decision that seems more based on personal and political considerations rather than pre-existing law. In the statement that Judicial Council set out to UCR students, they decided that because of laptopping violations, the entire election's results would be scrapped. But the question remains, why are both parties supposedly being punished for an action that was made legal for the 2016 election year? When we barely began this campaign, Elections Director Melina Reyes explained to all the candidates that laptopping was allowed, but severely frowned upon. Thus, laptopping would be legal, and both parties would obviously pursue this practice because both parties have an interest in getting elected, but simultaneously the student body would be fed the notion that laptopping was wrong, coercive, and dishonest. What kind of conditions are those to thrust student candidates into in the first place? It painted both parties in a negative light from the start of the process and made voters completely averse to voting at all, much less as voting on their phones. But still, your side members followed the rules accordingly, and when the additional guidelines came out on Wednesday of elections week, we followed them as best as we could in the pursuit of fair and honest elections process. But all those efforts were essentially tossed out the window when Judicial Council decided to essentially write new legislation, which we all know is overstepping boundaries. According to Article 3, Section 4 of the ASUCR Constitution, senators, not justices, and I quote, serve as the chief makers of policy for ASUCR. Even with this knowledge, the justices went ahead with calling for a new election and set the rules on it when it clearly states within the Elections Code under item 4, it shall be at the elections director's discretion to run a new neutral election online, correcting whatever mistake was made in the previous election. That brings me to my next point. Elections Code, Part 4, Section A, Subsection 3, elections director in conjunction with the elections committee have the ultimate authority in deciding the proper enforcement of the elections code through a simple majority vote. But as far as I understand, elections director was not included in this decision that was handed down from judicial council. Another glaring example of negligent judicial activism with little consideration for the other branches of government.
There's a motion on the floor.
Motion to extend time by 5 minutes.
I second.
Thank you.
Seconded by Leader Palmares, and all in favor?
What, how much?
By 5 minutes. And all in favor? 3-0-1. You can continue.
I appreciate that. And now, because of the opinion of 6 justices who may or may not have seen the actual results, the entire school will be forced to go through the elections process again. Students busy with focusing on their midterms will be bombarded yet again by candidates asking them to vote, and this time the convenience of voting on their phone will not even be available to them. They will be forced to walk to a handful of locations on campus in order to vote, sacrificing the few minutes they have in between their classes in order to vote in an election they are already beyond exhausted with. With campaign exhaustion and general aversion to voting after the controversy surrounding these last 2 years of elections, who knows if we will be able to reach the required 20% minimum mandated by UCOP and UCR guidelines, even with the combined effort of both parties. I urge the Senate to override the Judicial Council's call for re-elections. Our party is more than ready to go through it all once again because we are dedicated to the students and the issues that surround our campus. But going through the entire elections process again because of a misguided attempt at a more fair elections process seems like a ridiculous proposition. To put the candidates under duress and financial strain and put the students through the voting process again when they have their midterms to worry about seems like exactly the type of decision one would make when they haven't been through the process themselves. The fact that this decision for re-elections came before a verdict was reached on the violations perpetrated by the Orange Party and before the student population saw the results of the votes also leads me to believe that this decision was not made in good faith. I once again call upon the members of ASUCR to do what they were elected to do and serve in the interests of the students. Invalidating thousands of votes and countless hours put into the elections by the parties, their volunteer, and the elections committee is not in the best interest of the students. To make ad hoc decisions based on shaky legal ground, like the Judicial Council made, is not in the best interest of the students. I ask the Executive Cabinet to issue an executive order to hold off elections until Senate meets on Wednesday. Members of ASUCR, I hope you will take what I said into consideration because the power to avoid a nightmare like last year's elections rests solely in your hands now. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you remain at the podium, please, for conversation?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Taylor, Palmares.
AJ, a couple of things. Thank you so much for coming to speak. Input from the public is always well appreciated, especially executive meetings. You mentioned a couple of things in your public forum testimony. One being that you were sent to override the judicial opinion. Is that correct?
Yeah, essentially.
I don't believe the Senate has that authority, actually.
Well, you're gonna approve. You have to approve the decision, right, made by them.
We approve which decision?
The decision to have re-elections or not have re-elections.
It's one of the things we're talking about today.
Okay, well that's what I'm saying. I'm urging you guys to not have re-elections, basically.
Any other questions or comments for Aaron? Sorry.
All right.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Aaron. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in the public forum?
Hi, I'm Jennifer and Kelsey, and I'm a student here at UCR.
You'll have 3 minutes. Whenever you can.
Having a re-election this year doesn't seem beneficial to any student here at UCR. As a freshman and being my first year witnessing and going through elections here at UCR, I have to say it has been extremely stressful but confusing at the same time. When attending the first training, we were told to always maintain positive campaigning. It would be 3 stressful weeks, but in the long run worth it, and after week 3, that Monday at noon would be announced at the bell tower who won. However, this has not been the case this year. After week 3 passing and waiting anxiously to find out who won, we were sent an email that the announcement of the results would be delayed. No answer on why it was happening or when we would find out who would win. Not an email was sent about any violations, and no article in the newspaper was published on what the verdict came to. I understand where the judicial is coming from, but I don't believe that the decision that was made considered every aspect of how it would affect students. We are college students first. Dedicating all my time towards elections has had a strain on my grades. I signed up for one election process, not two, which also comes down to the financial aspect. I don't have money to spend on another election because those expenses go to books and other personal use. Every student that ran this year dedicated countless of hours to get students to vote this year and educating students on what our party stands for. While students felt awesome about making change on campus, some would say that their vote didn't matter, so why should they vote? But after explaining to them that every vote counted and what would benefit them, they decided to vote. If we had another re-election, I would have to tell those students that their vote didn't matter before, but this one does, which in result would be confusing, and we would be losing votes, which doesn't seem that fair. We have to understand when making decisions that when it affects all students at UCR, that we have to look at all aspects and look at the pros and cons to any situation. And having another re-election seems more cons than pros. Thank you.
Jennifer, will you start the podium? Are there any questions or comments for Jennifer? Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Hi.
Minutes once you begin speaking.
Okay.
3 minutes.
Corey Willis. Hi, I think you'll know me. Okay, so I'm going to be pretty brief with my comments. So from the email, and sorry for the ones of the gallery that use terms we might not be using. So from the email that the Judicial Council sent, they said that they drew their power from the article from the their power saying that they had the right to review all legislation in order to maintain the highest interest of the students. There's no legislation being reviewed, so the basis for them to call that doesn't really exist because they weren't reviewing legislation. It was based on something, the laptoping, the language for laptoping no longer exists at all anywhere in the governing documents. So to make a decision for a re-election on the basis of the creation of an unfair environment, laptoping was no longer allowed. So regardless of the opinion of it creating an unfair environment or not, it was not in legislation, so there's no legislation to review. So the basis of judicial's power to call that for maintaining fair interests of the students is false because there was no legislation to review and laptoping was allowed. So for me, it doesn't make sense how the decision to go back based off of that being an unfair environment, regardless of whether or not they felt it created an unfair environment, it was allowed, and you can't decide that some rules, it's not up to judicial to decide how the rules are interpreted. The rule didn't exist, so there's not really an interpretation to be had. That's pretty much all I just said.
Are there any questions or comments for Corey? Shafi?
As a president pro tempore, did any judicial member talk to you about their concern about laptoping?
No, the only person I spoke with about laptoping really at all, besides LRC and the Senate, was with the elections director, and we came to the end of our discussion, is my understanding that, although frowned upon, as was mentioned earlier, that laptoping would be impossible to regulate and therefore would be allowed.
So since the removal of the ban of laptoping, since then, no judicial member has talked to you about laptoping or how they disagree or how they did not approve it at all?
No.
Any other questions or comments for Corey? Thank you, Corey.
Hello, my name's Annette Jimenez, and I'm a student here at UCR.
Annette?
Yeah.
Sorry, that one.
Yeah.
You'll have 30 minutes.
Okay. So, in all honesty, a re-election I feel like is ridiculous. I get where your judicial is coming from, but no matter what, some students don't like voting or people coming up to them in general to vote. Some students are going to feel harassed no matter what, even if you just stop them to get their attention. 1,000 students have already voted. What makes you think that they're going to vote again Sorry. At this point, students are extremely tired of elections. Personally, I'm tired. I've dedicated my time to elections so that students understood what my party and I have to offer for the campus and for the students. Having class, homework, midterms, essays, elections, eating, and sleeping has taken a toll on me. I'm physically and emotionally drained. I haven't even got my sleeping schedule back, and having a re-election is totally going to affect my grades in this quarter. I'm already falling behind in classes because I'm so tired from walking in the hot sun all day. I get from class and all I want to do is sleep instead of work on my homework or study for midterms. Just a thought. Please reconsider the decision that was made. Thank you.
Thank you.
No. Any questions or comments for Annette? Thank you, Annette. Anyone else for public forum?
Hi, so my name is Brianna Javier. I kind of wrote something up real quick, so I'm sorry if it doesn't make sense at first, but is my 3 minutes going, by the way?
No. It
Okay.
starts when you begin.
Okay, thank you. Hi, as I said, my name is Brianna Javier, and I stand in front of you on behalf of all candidates who have participated in the past ASUCR elections of 2016. As those before me have said, the call for a re-election would be a disadvantage to students as well as the candidates. Personally, I have experienced several situations in which elections have become overwhelming, and I have experienced several mental breaks along the way. The stress it's very difficult to overcome. These mental breaks essentially only perpetuate the mental status on campus. As you all know, we are at a C-, and I think elections, bringing that into consideration, really affects students' mental health. This call for a second election will ultimately lose fantastic and driven candidates due to them putting school first. I don't think we should be punished on behalf of putting school first, and I don't think that the students overall should lose candidates based on the fact that they're putting their studies first. We should not be punished on behalf of individuals who have abused the method of laptoping. And then I also have a quick little list on behalf of some of our candidates. If you ask for a re-election, you're not going to get the 20% turnout with only polling sites. I do completely believe that. It's hard enough to get 20% with laptoping or without it. Many students don't really care particularly, I would say. By doing a re-election, we put the referendums at an extreme disadvantage because it's even harder to meet the 20% and pass. This continues to give ASUCR and elections a horrible stigma. So as we all know, last year's elections were not exactly perfect. So I do believe that it would be beneficial not to have a re-election, only because not only does it put students, it makes students, students don't believe in us, and they don't necessarily trust us. So I think putting a re-election would possibly, in their eyes, make it look as if we are trying to change something. And I think students' trust is one of the most important things, especially considering last year. Campaign and promotional materials have been paid for, used up, or discarded. And so, again, as people before me have said, unless someone's willing to fund it, I don't think that $100 per candidate should be put forth, because that is money for food that 1 in 3 students already face in food insecurity. That is money on books. That is money on school, other things. And having our names automatically forces us to be on the ballot and then punish us for not having resources to fully campaign with.
There's a motion on the floor.
Move to extend time to 5 minutes.
Second.
Seconded by Taylor Palmars. All in favor? 301. You have 5 minutes and 13 seconds.
Thank you. Overall, I believe that the use of a re-election would be detrimental to not only students, but as well as candidates. Candidates will be put up for another week of essentially, personally, I can tell you, I missed so much class. I missed a certain amount of class that allowed me to get the votes that I wanted. I wanted to be out there 24/7 if I could be, but I was not able to. So putting that on the table and really forcing students to put their mental health before, or to put elections before their mental health, is something so crucial, especially in today's society, as well as students. Students don't they don't want to be harassed again to vote. They have already been harassed as it is. They've been asked repeatedly from different candidates from different parties. So to ask them to go through this again is essentially doing them a disadvantage. We would be harassing them. They would trust us less. It would be harder to get them more involved on campus, as most of us have expressed. So I do believe that a re-election would be detrimental. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments for Brianna?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else for public forum?
Pen, right?
If you could leave that pen up there unless Joe, you need it.
I just realized there's a pen here.
Oh, okay.
My bad.
And would you state your name for the minutes?
Arturo Gomez, third year political science, law and society major. Hold on.
And you'll have 3 minutes.
Well, my opinion's probably going to be unpopular based on everything everybody said thus far, but why not have a revote? I mean, look, I've spent a lot of money too as an independent. My limit's at $400, so obviously I was supposed to go grocery shopping today and I heard about the meeting, so I came here just so I could speak. But back to my point. If you don't want people to be harassed, don't harass them. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, use the existing campaign merchandise you already have. There are creative ways to campaign without spending money and harassing students. Now, I'm okay with having off-campus polling sites. I think it makes it levels the playing field a bit, in a sense. I mean, you don't have people going on phones telling people to vote, so laptopping is no longer a problem. Now, I'm pretty sure this could have all been avoided had there been a ban on campaigning during elections week. I mean, let's face it, the whole campus becomes a huge polling place, so it really makes it difficult for, cheating to be avoided. I mean, I'll call it what it is. Laptopping is cheating. Whether or not it's legal, it's a different story, but I think legalizing the problem didn't really solve the problem. In fact, it exacerbated it. I mean, the fact that the Judicial Council had to step in to issue a revote really underlines the severity of this issue. I'm not sure what else I can say here, but I guess overall, I think a revote is necessary if we want an actual accurate count of the student body. And just to clarify also, we have to remember in the school year, I think it was 2012, 2013, turnout was 17%. So I think we can do without 20%. It sucks for the referenda, but if we want a clean election, we got to do it by any means necessary. But yeah, my opinion is unpopular, but I think I'm on the right side of it. So that's that. Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Arturo? Shaki?
How come you didn't come up to Senate and lobby them to not remove the ban on laptopping?
But to be quite fair, I didn't think they'd listen to me. Considering the chaos of last year's elections, I felt that many of the senators sitting there probably would have blew off my opinion, as they have before, with regard to the, I guess what was turned out to be an illegal appointment of the external VP. So I really didn't feel that my opinion would be valued, so I didn't go. I assumed it was going to be knocked off anyway, so that's why.
But you didn't try with the election director or any of the senators?
I think overall it doesn't really take, I guess, someone to talk about such an obvious
30
issue.
seconds.
Overall,
There's a motion on the floor.
Move to extend time by 5 minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Sorry, 401.
I mean, I wasn't even going to run until last minute, so I really had no say in what was going to happen. That's why I didn't go up and talk. But had I known that laptopping would still be an issue despite its legalization, I would have said something. But yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Michael?
Just quickly, how was the elections code updated?
Well, laptopping was removed.
I mean, not laptopping. I mean, how is the elections code updated?
Approval by the Senate, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Any questions or comments for our speaker? Please remember to address the chair, not the speaker, and the speaker also addresses the chair.
I apologize.
Any other questions or comments for Arturo?
Sure.
Good to see you again, Arturo.
Likewise.
Thank you, Arturo.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public forum?
Hi, I'm Bo Young.
And you'll have 3 minutes.
I'll keep this pretty short. Sorry, this is my first time going up here, but so I'm just give my piece on the issue. I'm a person who's been working on a number of projects for UCR, you know, to better like the CNS experience initially, and the Uber program that I'm sure you guys have heard about. And right now, I'm looking at. I was pretty frustrated with how elections went because I really wanted to work on the projects that like I was doing. Instead of just working to get elected, I wanted to work on the actual issues, the action committees that I have. I have people waiting on me to see what direction we're going to go for on these things. If, for example, I'm doing a library safety initiative that I'm advocating for, and I started this before any kind of ASUCR involvement, and for the last couple of weeks I've had to put it completely on hold. And I know, like my fellow, everybody else who's running on both sides, we all have things that like we want to push. We want to start working for the students right now. And another week of just waiting elections, spending the resources on elections, that's taking away from the time that these candidates could be using to make real change at UCR. And whoever gets elected, that's what we're trying to do. It's less about elections. Honestly, I'd like to know if I won or lost either way, so I can go back to working on the Uber program, so I can go back to work on my library safety initiative. Just so, like, I think personally, although I think that the decision made by judicial was a good one, and I do believe that we need elections reform, but at this point, it all came a little late, and then implementing it wise, without providing a incentive for the voters to come and vote, it's just going to turn into more harassment of the voters. It'll come from vote on my phone to only drag you to the polling site. And that's what I'm afraid of. And I'm afraid of a lot of things dying in committee. That's all. Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Bo? Taylor?
Hey Bo, we've actually had heard about your Uber program a couple of times with this board through the different studies you're working on. I just want to commend you for that sentiment and remind everyone who's in the room and running that it doesn't matter what position you have, you can always make changes in the community. And regardless of whatever results are, our offices are always open to come in and like let's do something together.
Definitely. No matter what, I want to be working towards it.
And we'll see you there.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Bo? Thank you, Bo.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.
Is there anyone else for public forum? Okay, then we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the judicial report. So if any member from the Judicial Council would like to speak, or if all of you would like to speak, the entire report needs to be 3 minutes unless ECAB decides to extend your time. Taylor?
I'm going to extend time,
By how much?
15 minutes.
By 15 minutes. Is there a second to extend time by 15 minutes? Someone? All in favor? 401. So you'll have 15 minutes. Or 18 minutes. Thank you.
We're under the impression that we're invited here, so that means that we're here to answer questions that you all may have. We didn't really prepare like a judicial report other than the letter you have.
Okay, yeah, we only titled it judicial report because we felt like that would be best fit for this time. So if we'll just have ECAB ask their questions and then you all can answer.
Okay, and then I know that some of judicial have some reports, so they might be able to give it, but would like to hear what the questions are first.
Before you give the report? I think it would probably be easiest for ECAB if you gave the reports that are prepared and then we have questions and then we can respond to those.
Joe,
We just go.
And please state your name for the purpose of a minute, please.
Joe Bujama. Do I need to sign in, or is this?
Yes, you, yes, sir. And whenever you're ready, time to start.
All right. I'd just like to be clear that there are a couple times where I mentioned like majority of the council in this sometimes, but this is just my opinion. So even if I like reference the majority of the council, just know that this is me. Okay. According to the ASUCR Elections Code, Part 5, Item 9, Section A2, after the general election and necessary runoff elections, the Elections Director and the ASUCR Executive Director and 4 members of the judicial branch must compile the results, sign them for verification, and post them to the ASUCR office publicly. Final results must also be sent to the IT department in charge of coordinating the online elections so that they may be updated to the ASUCR website with newly elected members. After much discussion and investigation into the Elections Code violations, I've chosen not to sign off on the elections results. It is recommended that re-election occurs in order to receive verification from Judicial Council. There are several factors to consider when it comes to understanding this decision. The Elections Code preamble reads as follows. We, the undergraduate students of the Riverside campus of the University of California, establish, as per stated in the goals of the preamble of the ASUCR Constitution, democratic elections as the primary mechanism to ensure the smooth continuation of the student government. These bylaws, as confirmed by the ASUCR Senate, shall be cited as the ASUCR Election Code and shall govern all procedures for all ASUCR elections in order to administer and execute the elections in a fair and efficient manner to ensure that the purposes of the ASUCR elections are legitimately completed. The purpose of these bylaws is to illustrate that the students of the University of California, Riverside want a fair, democratic, and legitimate election in order to ensure that their elected student representatives are truly representative of the students' needs. According to the ASUCR Constitution, Article 6, Section A, the Judicial Council of ASUCR shall be vested with the judicial authority of the association. The council's authority shall extend to all judicial cases as defined herein arising under this Constitution, the ASUCR bylaws, the official actions of ASUCR executives, officers, employees, and Senate, and any matters delegated to the council by the ASUCR Senate or this Constitution. Also, the Judicial Rules of Procedure, Section 10A, reads the Judicial Council shall have the ultimate authority to interpret the wording of the ASUCR Constitution and that of legislation enacted in accordance to the ASUCR Constitution. Because the Constitution reads this way, it is responsibility of the Judicial Council to ensure that all rules and policies that affect the ASUCR operation of ASUCR elections are consistent with the ASUCR Constitution, and it falls on the Judicial Council to ensure that all rules passed by the Elections Director that affect how elections are conducted are consistent with the preamble of the Elections Code and seek to promote a fair, democratic, and legitimate election for the students of the university. Now that the proper context has been addressed, I will explain why I did not want to validate the elections. For the 2015-2016 election, the Elections Director legalized the practice of laptopping, but this decision calls into question the extent to which such a practice is consistent with the Elections Code. According to the ASUCR Elections Code, Chapter 7, Part 4, Item 1, Section A1, as per the ASUCR Elections Code preamble, the Elections Director and the Elections Committee shall have the right to enforce campaigning regulations in order to establish a fair, legitimate, and democratic election. Keeping in mind the aforementioned code, there are 3 questions that need to be answered when considering legalizing laptopping. 1, does the practice of laptopping ensure a democratic election? 2, does the practice of laptopping ensure a fair election? 3, does the practice of laptopping ensure a legitimate election? If the legalization of laptop doesn't have an appropriate answer to these questions, the practice then can't be considered consistent with the Elections Code. In an email sent out by the Elections Director, laptopping is defined as when candidates or volunteers use electronic devices such as phones, tablets, or actual laptops to approach students and tell them to vote, usually for specific candidates or parties. In the email, the Elections Director proceeded to describe laptopping as follows. This practice is often targets first years, and the people who use it rely on you, the students, being uninformed of elections and how your vote matters. Laptopping can also be coercive and manipulative by intimidating students to vote a certain way. There are several problems with the legalization of laptopping, and a fundamental one can be addressed through the email sent out by the Elections Director. Several questions come up that demand answers. For example, if one were aware of the fact that laptopping could be an issue to the extent that one would describe the practice as coercive and manipulative, and that it could potentially lead to candidates intimidating students, why would one allow the practice? Much of the reason comes down to the fact that in the 2014-2015 election, the practice of laptopping was illegal, but was found difficult to regulate. The Elections Director this year decided that it would be difficult, because it would be difficult to regulate, it would be better to legalize the practice. It's impossible to stop every crime and unethical act, but we still have rules and regulations that work to prevent them from happening and sanctions in the event that those events occur. Just because it's difficult to regulate laptoping doesn't mean we should get rid of the rules that prevent the practice. Laws and rules are created in order to protect the people from being subject to those acts of coercion, manipulation, and intimidation. In the first day of the voting for the elections week, the elections director of ASUCR received literally dozens of emails and complaints of candidates' conduct because of candidates' conduct during elections, specifically pertaining to laptoping. We even have records of students saying their devices were taken from their hands and that their parties voted for the students, completely undercutting the democratic process. This is a clear example of how the legalization of laptoping has contributed to the downfall of democratic election. Another thing to consider is what the legalization of laptoping, considering all of the above, says about the elections process in ASUCR as a legitimate organization. The legitimacy of the elections process is questionable at best. Think about the students of the university and their experiences during this process. The candidates in the ASUCR elections are campaigning to be elected student representatives. They are running to be the voice of the students. We have reports of candidates approaching students in groups and not leaving until the students have voted for their parties. We have reports of candidates following students to their classes after explicitly stating that they would prefer to be left alone. These are solid grounds for harassment. There are students that feel that candidates who are running to be elected officials are harassing them. The legalization of laptoping has opened the door that has allowed students to feel this way, and the Judicial Council feels that these actions and reports, all exclusive to laptoping, has delegitimized not only the elections process, but to some extent ASUCR as an organization. The Judicial Rules of Procedure, Section 10C, gives the Judicial Council the power to review complaints regarding the Elections Committee and any other office or body of ASUCR. The Judicial Rules of Procedure, Section 10D, gives the judicial power the power to judge the actions of the executive and or legislative branches as to its constitutionality and ordering the cessation of actions that are judged to be unconstitutional. It is my opinion that the elections director's decision to legalize the practice of laptoping was unconstitutional and thus has compromised the integrity of the election. Because of this, I shall exercise my right to refrain from validating this election. And then just another little thing, Constitution, Article 4, Article 6, Section F, finality, all decisions from the Judicial Council shall be final unless reversed by subsequent Judicial Council action. So, that's me.
Thank you, Jim. We'll move into questions and comments. So when we have the questions and comments, when the queue closes, no questions will come to you anymore, okay?
Okay.
So I saw Melina's hand, Taylor's.
Okay, I have a couple actually.
Okay, we'll start with Melina.
All right, so a few different questions that
Melina, 1 second.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So, first thing referencing a sentence you said just a couple seconds ago that it was my decision to legalize laptoping. Reiterating a point from before, where is the vote and who votes to change any bylaws?
Who votes to circulate the Senate?
Exactly. So that's not my decision.
Okay.
All right.
And then change the fact that that's still a thing. So.
Well, but since we're considering facts are important, and it wasn't my decision. So, going off first with that. Next, I would just like to ask, do you recall a meeting soon after I took my position in which I met with all of Judicial Council and I asked specifically for concerns? Laptoping was discussed, but at the end we came to the agreement that how I was going to address it, which we all saw my actions, was consistent with the promises that were made in that meeting, correct?
I'll comment on that later.
Pass that off to
So that was
I
your
could
answer
answer.
by Hayden.
Okay.
Are there any further questions, Melina?
I'll take it.
Next would be Taylor. Is there anyone else on the queue? Summer, Melina? Taylor, Summer, Melina, Shashi. Yes.
I do a couple of things. First off, in your statement or your report, you quoted quite a bit of different pieces of constitutional, the Constitution as well as the judicial rules of procedure. Any chance you mind sending a copy of whatever you wrote down later so I can put in the minutes? Just a typical thing, it'd be just really helpful.
Sure.
Perfect. A couple of different questions, concerns. So in your in the elections update, I just want to point out a couple of things that basically I at least personally have issues with why I'm having a re-election be a bad idea. First one, mostly just the timeline of the elections, as well as like the feasibility of it. I don't know how much a running a re-election would cost, but I would assume it's a couple thousand. I would also assume that that's money that we would need to get approved through the finance process, was approved by the Senate, and something that I don't know if could happen within 15 days of the closing of the polls. Secondly, in the elections update, you mentioned a couple of different things from, as I'm a new judicial counsel, I mentioned a couple of things supporting about the judicial counsel shall maintain the highest interest of students. And they talked about how whether the issues they found, whether real results constitute the actual voice of the student body. All things I generally agree that student voice is important, and the legitimacy of the elections are also a concern that I'm sure everyone takes very seriously. But moving to a re-election to a polling spot would be nigh impossible to get any referendums passed. Referendums that arguably might have already passed and would not in a re-election. Referendums that fund ASUCR, ASPB, the Highlander, from funding Costa Hall, and everything in between. Everything that makes UCR, UCR. Besides the low voter turnout for the referendum, I think a low voter turnout, and make no mistake, a polling place would have a low voter turnout. A lower voter turnout represents a less voice of students actually participating in an election, as well as for like what representatives they have. The candidates in public forum, they mentioned the financial strain it places on themselves, and I think that should take into consideration considering all of us have ran before. But more importantly, I just honestly do not think it's financially feasible or as like something that can happen in 15 days from this forward. There's a lot that goes in election, just saying that like we need to have a re-election. It's feasible. And I really have my time.
Would you like to respond or wait till you hear other comments?
I'll respond. This is just kind of like a brief general like comment. It's not that judicial council is invalidating elections, but we're just choosing not to validate it. And that's just because of art, that's just some things. I can only speak to myself in terms of like my personal decision. And so for me, it came down to a question of principle versus practicality. I don't agree with how it was set up. And so like for like me, like the principle is important. But that being said, like I also recognize like that it might be impractical to do so. And again, I'm one of 6, so ultimately like, or like again, I'm one person and you'd need 4 justices to do so. Or to sign off on it. So, what's it called? I mean, if you guys can like convince me that it's like more impractical than it would be, if you can convince me that it'd be more impractical to not have elections, that would be to uphold the principle of having it, then I mean, I'd be down to sign it, but you'd have to convince 3 other justices still, so
Well, it's
it's
a
just
good
something to
thing
keep in
we're all
mind.
here then, or at least 3 of them.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. Next one is speakers list this summer.
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank everybody for coming out on Sunday night and coming to this, and I wanted to thank you all and thank you for making that statement. Something when I was reading the email that was sent that I was thinking about was wondering the reasoning why, and I think you covered that very clearly, so I appreciate like hearing your reasoning behind emails, so thank you for that, and I'm looking forward to reading it when we get it later. I had a couple questions regarding some things you said. So, in principality, is something that you were mentioning. I agree with Taylor that in practicality, it makes it very difficult on students in many, many different ways. Some people spoke about public forum, and some Taylor mentioned, and so I agree with those because it is going to be hard for students to do re-election practically. But also on principality, if there were grounds for harassment, which it sounds like there were, I didn't think we needed the cases, but I trust you all, and that's what your branch does. and there were cases that were given. I was just wondering, why couldn't those individuals who were harassing, or you have found to, that they were the ones who were harassing individuals, be held accountable individually so that there's no need for re-election? And then why, so if the laptoping was fundamentally unconstitutional in your branch's eyes, why didn't that come up before the election started when that happened? I'm just wondering, and with all the time that has elapsed, so much has happened in between, and so I'm just wondering what came you all to make that decision after the elections ended instead of when the decision for laptoping was decided.
So this is, again, most of this is just my personal analysis of things, and so there are a couple things to consider. This quarter, we meet up on, we've addressed everything as quickly as we could considering when we meet. We meet on, Judicial Council meets on Fridays at like 5, and that's just because like we're all students and that's just the only time, that's the best time for all of our schedules. And so in terms of addressing it like when it happened, the thing is, or this is, again, this is my understanding, Section 10C says we can review complaints of the election inspector, and so that's to me like what gives us the jurisdiction to like even address, or we can review the complaints and stuff like that. And so we received a bunch of complaints of laptoping, and so that was an action that was and what's it called? Sorry to like keep saying like election director, but it's like just that's just the way my process is in my mind, like election director. So, but basically like this is, in my opinion, we're responding to the complaints and everything, and so that's why it gives us the jurisdiction to like do that. So we can address this, and so because of that, that's like why we couldn't that's why I don't believe we could have done it. Different justices might see it differently, so like different justices might have different answers, but so there's that. And then there's another question then?
Yeah, so why couldn't individuals be held accountable?
1 minute.
Okay, as far as the individuals go, we could, because it was legal, we couldn't do anything about it. Like, we had a case, it was the case of Evans v. Riverside, where
There's a motion on the floor.
I'm going to extend time by 30 minutes. We don't need it, we don't need it. Yeah.
Seconded by Sardi, for all in favor? Or the other one? Sorry about that.
Yeah, so yeah, like I was saying, like the examples that we mentioned before were examples of things that happened because of cases. And so we have a case where there was literally a student who walked up to a candidate and called him out on laptoping, and the candidate looked at the student and said, "You're just one voice, your opinion doesn't matter." And so it's like, based off of the rules and everything, that our job as a justice is to look at the Constitution and the bylaws and to make decisions based off of that and decide whether or not we can do punishment. And because of the way the ASUCR bylaws were set up, and because of the legalization of laptop, there's nothing we can do about that. There was another case where a student said that they felt that they were harassed and they were approached by 2 students, and ultimately we had to dismiss the case because we don't have a charge to do anything about that too. So there is a lot of, it's not even that we could hold it's one thing to talk about the individuals, but the system as a whole was what was messed up to start with, and so we can't hold people accountable under like a messed up system, and that's part of the reason, at least in my opinion, why like we couldn't do that.
Okay, thank you so much for answering.
Let me, if I could add to his response also. A lot of these cases, when they were brought up in the first 2 days of elections. This was before the new guidelines came out. So before that, laptoping was legal, so we didn't have any power or any charge to hold any individuals accountable because it was highly discouraged, but it was legal. And then when the guidelines came out, those individuals could not be retroactively reprimanded because they weren't aware of the guidelines on Wednesday. And so that's why we feel that, individuals on the council feel that laptoping created an environment that wasn't fair and just. But we couldn't do anything to reprimand individuals or parties because of the situation where it was legal and halfway through. So.
I'm sorry to keep you at the end. Unless they ask a direct question, I'm going to take it up in the Thank you. We'll move on to Melina.
All right, so, I mean, I saw the reports that I handed off to you all, so I'm pretty familiar with a lot of them. The majority of them, when I reached out to them to ask if they wanted this to move forward as case, explicitly stated no. So that's just to, you know, qualify and get that information out there, that when the student was actually asked, did you feel like this was serious enough to impede elections, they stated no. Of the ones that did get passed to you and the ones that did decide to pursue a case, did any of the cases get confirmed? Were any strikes assigned for them? Was there any validity that could be determined from any of the investigations that you made? Because I haven't been informed at all.
Well, again, we can't make decisions based off of rules that we can't punish them for something that's like legal. And like, you know, there was nothing that we could do. If there was, we probably would have, but we couldn't. In one case, there was a case where there was something for like an illegal polling site, but I guess the elections committee had already like given they were given strikes for that, so for us to do so would have been double jeopardy, and so like we couldn't do that. And then we couldn't do anything about the actual laptopping, so that case has to slide. Yeah, I mean, for each like, there's no case that we looked at where had laptopping been legalized, we wouldn't have come to different decisions. But because that's the case, like we couldn't issue any strikes on behalf of laptopping.
Okay. So that addresses whether any strikes were given, but what about in the investigations? Was there any validity to the violations reports?
Well, again, that's something that if we can't do anything about it in the first place, we can't even look into it, because it would be a pointless action. Like, yeah, we find out that it's valid, but we can't actually do anything because it's not we don't have the power to do anything.
Well,
So if you want, I could add to the bottom, but for ECAB, if you could consolidate your reports just so Joe would be able to answer them at the end of all of that, I think that would make things go more efficiently.
Are you still speaking after?
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you, Melina. You're not, we'll consolidate the rest of it.
I can narrow it down to, all right, if there's re-elections and there's a polling station, and am I going to be seeing you volunteering?
It's not really my job, that's yours. So, I mean, like, my job is to...
My job is to get volunteers, so you could be a volunteer.
Melina, we have recommendations as to how we think that polling sites would be can be utilized to get either the 20% or close to the 20%. So this is not anything antagonizing. This is where we want this to be a fair process, and we want you to be able to handle it. So if you could think about it like that.
And part of that is that I need resources, and one of those resources is manpower. And that includes volunteers. So I'm simply asking, would you be volunteered? And you just said no, so that answered my question.
Yeah, probably would.
Thank you, Melina. Does that conclude your So then we'll move on to shopping.
My question to the judicial branch is, who decides the procedure of elections?
Who decides the procedure of elections?
Yes.
The elections director, but that being said, if it goes against if it's not constitutional, then we review like all of you guys and your actions, and if it's found to be unconstitutional, then that's when we step in. So.
Well,
All questions in one.
okay. Well, according to the Constitution, Article 7, Election, Section 8, the procedure of the conduct of nomination, campaign, and election shall be determined by the Senate and not the judicial branch. So you are saying that if there's going to be a re-election, then we have to have a polling station. That is overstepping your power, because the legislative branch decides if how the procedure is going to be, not the judicial branch, and not the executive branch.
So would you like Hayden to answer it? Just hand it out?
Yeah, can I just sit down and hit this thing? Or?
I just have one more, real quick.
Are there any other questions? Because there's still speakers on the queue, so are there any questions specifically for Joe?
Well, I'll just add.
Shopping, you may finish.
Okay. The polling station was actually a bylaw that was passed by last year's Senate. But however, this year's Senate looked into it and they did not see that this was practical. So they didn't want to have more voices involved in deciding who's going to be elected. They knew that with polling station, there's not going to be a 20% voter turnout. So that's why it allowed online voting, and then removed the laptoping ban.
Is there a question?
So that would make that's a comment. So we'll move on to Taylor, who's next on the speakers
Hey,
queue.
Joe. Sorry for keeping you up here. A couple of different things. First off, I just want to go back to your earlier comment. So you said if laptoping was still legal, judicial would have came to a different decision on a lot of different cases, right?
Hmm?
You earlier when you were answering to the elections director, you said mentioned about how like since laptoping was legalized, you couldn't punish any of the violation or any of the cases for the violation because it was legal or something to that effect. Is that right?
In my like, we couldn't have done. We could. I mean, if
Because
something's
laptop is
legal, we
legal,
can't do
right?
anything. Yeah.
Would judicial done something different if it was illegal?
I mean,
We'll
yeah.
be able to give out strikes.
Be able to
yeah.
do something.
Oh, that's not just clarifying. I just find it ironic that I'm sitting here this year opposed to last year.
Oh.
That's actually not my question. So you mentioned the practicality of the argument. I totally agree with you. So I got some numbers for you. To run a new election would be roughly about $2,000 from what I understand just for the polling site. For anyone who doesn't know, we pay a third party to do like the elections process, the polling process, through online server, if I remember correctly. And then going here, it's cost about like $2,000 to run an election. And I haven't checked the actual budget, but I don't think the elections director has that kind of money in the budget. And I haven't checked the ASUCR finances anytime recently, but I understand it was the year about $20,000 in the room. Yeah, I've heard also that there might have been some like smart efficiency cutting, but even then, like it's not money we have exactly lying around. I mentioned earlier against the practicality of just anything from getting that 20% margin. Having run an election, I know exactly how hard it is to get students out, and every day talking to students to care, they're saying that these issues aren't just issues of principle, and issues of like our community, of practicality. That like having those like resources and that student voice for even anything that makes SRC makes the Highlanders proudly call this place home is something that we take really seriously. And without those referendums, without a way to get to that 20% mark, running a re-election the way that judicial is suggesting isn't feasible. Isn't financially feasible, isn't practical on ASUCR's part or the candidate's part or the community's part. But my question, I had a question, I lost it. Sorry.
The last individual that would like to speak with you is Summer, and then after Summer, you may.
Sorry, I actually had a question just responding to when we were talking, but I didn't say it. Yeah, when you were talking about harassment cases and laptoping cases, I was just wondering, like, those could be separated. And so I know that some of the laptoping cases resulted in harassment or the other way around, like they're connected, but if the cases could be followed through to hold individuals accountable on the basis of harassment instead of on the basis of laptoping, since laptoping is legal. And so that was one of my questions, and then the other one was just voice of the students. You mentioned that, and so I just wanted to address that, and that if there was a case that the voice of the students would be increasingly diminished over the future of the ASUCR's ability, like just the future of ASUCR as a whole, would be significantly decreased by the continuing of this re-election. Would that persuade judicial to, would that be a case that you would consider, like, to come up with some kind of like agreement so that all of us can agree on something? That was eloquently put, but if you have any questions.
Yeah. Again, I can't speak for the rest of the justices on that. I guess it would just come down to like just the majority, like just the justices and still, like, so that would just be something to have a conversation with like all of them. But as far as the first question, so was the first question kind of asking why not do something about the harassment as opposed to laptoping?
Separating the two.
Separating the two. Well, laptop, so it wouldn't be in our jurisdiction. Our jurisdiction is to handle, there's no ethical violations or anything of that sort in the elections code that like we could do something about. And harassment, there's nothing really about like harassment anywhere in there that we could do something, so that's my understanding. But yeah, so.
Thank you, Joe. We appreciate it. And so right now we're at 18 minutes.
Before Hayden speaks, this is just to answer one of Shafi's questions about whether Judicial Council is initiating laws or legislation. Those conditions that you see on the list, they are the conditions that the majority of the council would like to see in order to sign it. So we're not legislating or doing anything. These are all conditions for us to validate any elections code, just so that's clear. Go ahead.
So I don't really have like a particular statement, but what I do have is there's like several questions, or I guess themes of questions that are coming up that I'd like to address. First of all is the idea that Judicial has not addressed laptopping, and this is all of a sudden Judicial saying, oh my gosh, we're against laptopping. That's simply not the case. Starting with the application and interview process for the elections director, the candidate for the position, Ms. Reyes, stressed deciding based on the expected impact on the students, about changes to the elections code, especially in retrospect to laptopping. There was a laptopping question on the case, on the application. She also stressed collaboration between Judicial and the Elections Committees. The logical conclusion from this is that we'd be consulted when things come up, and these concerns would be taken seriously. However, on February 3rd, the Elections Director, in conjunction with the Senate, as we all know, that the Elections Director and the Elections Committee makes recommendations through the process. They go through LRC and then they hit Senate. The Elections Director passed through changes to the code, most importantly, the allowance of laptopping and the adjustment of 5 strikes, adjustment to make it 5 strikes instead of 3 to disqualify candidates. The same day, earlier, Judicial's meetings were at 5, and Senate's meetings were at 6. This is the exact same day that the Elections Director came and consulted Judicial about these rules. Which is after it's already gone through LRC. It's after it's already on the agenda for the Senate. And Judicial expressed concerns about the plan to say that laptopping is legal, however, we're going to say it's coercive. But I mean, to ask us an hour before the Senate meeting about our concerns regarding laptopping, I'm really not sure how much influence that translated into. No guidelines were put into laptopping at all in the code. As Mr. Willis, the president pro tempore, pointed out, laptopping is not even mentioned at all in the elections code, which, so the logical conclusion is now it's legal. Moving on to elections, after the reports came flooding in, there was a meeting between Judicial, the Elections Committee, and the Executive Director. Here was probably the first time Judicial started, saying, look, we're going to have to certify these results at the end of the day, and there's some serious doubts on whether we're going to have 4 justices that'll certify. The Elections Committee wasn't having it. There was especially one of the members of the Elections Committee was quite vocal about making sure that, about basically making me feel, making our Chief Justice Simon feel that our concerns were ridiculous and that there were no reason for that. Guidelines were put in on Wednesday morning, but we really can't, as we mentioned before, we really can't hold people to guidelines on Monday and Tuesday that we put in on Wednesday. That's really not fair to say. You should have known that you couldn't do this. That would set a very chilling precedent that we can put in legislation or guidelines after the fact and then hold people to them beforehand. So this is the only solution to uphold our constitutional responsibility to maintain the highest interests of students, is to start fresh, ensure elections are fair and not coercive this time. It's our duty, it's our mandate, and it's our responsibility. And with the certification requirement, this is the mechanism that we're using. You'll notice that we don't ever explicitly say we're requiring this. This is what is most likely going to be required for people to sign the elections code. We have been talked with and consulted, yes, and we do appreciate the fact that we have had meetings several times. However, that influence just really didn't translate into meaningful change that Judicial Council could be happy with, and that's unfortunate because our satisfaction with the final results is required for our certification of the elections code. It's an unfortunate consequence. It's a result of checks and balances, and we wish there was another way, but unfortunately there is not, and we encourage everyone to do their best to make this run as smoothly as possible. Additionally, about the strikes, why weren't strikes assigned? The fact is, because we've mentioned already, it's really difficult to assign strikes just for laptopping, you know, after it's been made legal. Also, because the guidelines were put in on Wednesday and many of the reports were for Monday and Tuesday, I mean, there's also really nothing we could do about that. It's just, it was a lack of being able to hold candidates accountable for things that are really making our elections, I mean, just have the reputation that they have. That's, I mean, and the fact that it's going to be less democratic if fewer students vote. I did think about this, and I'm sure that every single justice considered this when they were making their decision, you know, and we were deliberating. We know that with fewer polling stations only and without the ability to laptop, unfortunately, we're going to have lower turnout. I wish it was different, but that's just the fact. However, it's very undemocratic to have coercive conditions in the elections that judicial cannot do anything about, not hold any candidates accountable for any of that, and then to certify those election results saying, yes, this is the voice of the student body. It's really a tough sell. I guess just another few smaller things. One more thing with that. I definitely hope that, you know, future elections directors, future elections committees, and the future of ASUCR in general, that we look into creative solutions where we can get higher voting turnout, you know, but without, you know, giving the ability to laptop and use coercive action. That's something that is going to definitely be a process, but it's something that, you know, I'm definitely willing to participate in. And Ms. Reyes, you'll notice that, you know, I'm always willing to participate with you, and I'm sure you're going to ask me whether I'd volunteer. I'd ask you to please send me when you're going to do it, and if I can make it, I will be there. Just another few things, you know, that I want to address. In public forum, someone said we may or may not have seen actual results. I just want to make it clear, no one has seen the results. This is not what that's based on. I think that's about it. So I'm eager for your questions.
Questions or comments for you? We'll start with Michael. Anyone? Summer, Shelby, and we have Taylor. Let me write that down. You want Summer, Rowena, Shelby, Taylor?
Yep. If you don't mind, can I just come down to the podium? That's fine. I just feel a little bit easier because I feel like up here can sometimes be a little bit of a separation, and I don't want to talk to you.
Point of order, where do you intend to go?
From the podium, like I mentioned.
To address ECAB? Or to address
judicial. To address judicial in the gallery. It's a little bit easier for my prepared remarks, so I hope that's okay. Can I take over? Can I take over the podium?
Wait, huh?
Do you mind?
Do you mind what?
If I just podium?
Where would you like me to go? You want me to sit and you want to go on the podium?
If that's fine.
I mean,
It's nothing that's unprecedented.
if that's what the chair's going to
I'm
allow
actually.
It's really unprecedented.
It's actually.
Is the chair going to allow this?
Would you mind just staying up here, Michael?
I
feel
can.
like remarks can still be heard.
Okay. The only reason is I just felt like it seems a little imposing to say what I have
I
to
think
say
it would
all
be
the way
more
up there.
imposing for you to
Just
be.
because something is unprecedented doesn't mean that it can't happen. That's what
I think it's really imposing that.
It's up to the chair.
Okay. No, that's fine. No, that's fine.
I just want to remain order here. So
Okay.
Thank you, Michael.
So it can be a little bit difficult. No, that's fine. I can say it from my seat. I think, as Hayden mentioned, maybe it's a little more comfortable for him as well. So difficult and how to begin. But before I do, let me clarify to you, Hayden, Dojo, Jobama, that I am coming from a place that not only respects, but very much sees the necessity of having judicial input and the judicial role that's played, to the point that I lost my position last year trying to salvage the judicial branch. And even this year, I advocated to try to bring powers to the judicial branch of censure, which I even talked with you personally. We agreed to that. We reached a conclusion. We could both agree that there was input from both sides on that. Now, I want to start just by saying that we model our system on U.S. government's 3 branches. That's the system we aspire to. Now, I'm not going to talk about the intentions or the results or practicalities or anything like that. In fact, a lot of these things I'm going to bring up, hopefully you will consider. And I like to think that you all came in here with an open mind and haven't just already made up your mind, and that regardless of what anything that anybody else would say, that you would refuse to hear it. I don't believe that. I know that you all came in here hoping that we'd be able to reach an understanding. And that's what I'm hoping to do with this. In U.S. courts are able to fill gaps by adding elements, requirements, in the absence of statutory guidelines on an issue. However, they cannot contradict nor usurp statutory law as a matter of public policy. Now, this might seem a little bit dense, but if you stay with me, I can kind of help explain it for members who might not be as caught up on matters of legalese. So no matter how much you may disagree with the consequences, judicial counsel, in your own opinion, you said it's your responsibility to ensure that elections were held in accordance with the Elections Code. Since February, months before elections began, the Senate voted to strike any mention of laptopping from the Elections Code, which means that laptopping is allowed as a matter of public policy. Legislation is a matter of public policy. For instance, whether or not to disallow laptopping. And that must be left up to the legislative branch, because they're the democratically elected people in the government. The judicial branch, you're given powers to interpret. Absolutely. Nobody's actually going to hear to question that, least of all me. However, this is where statutory language is absent or ambiguous, and you must enforce the language where it is clear, as legislated by Senate. So even if you were to find a justification to say that the language is absent or ambiguous regarding laptopping, which, as I previously mentioned, that the intentional striking from the Elections Code would nullify that point. As a matter of law, it is always up to the will of the legislative branch if they want to statutorily amend or supersede judicial common law. Judicial branch can evaluate laws. That is very specific. That is an expressly written power in the Constitution. You evaluate bylaws, but only as a matter of constitutionality. The Constitution says nothing regarding laptopping. And if it was held unconstitutional, as was mentioned previously by several individuals, it would implicate every referendum and every election results that have so far come from an election where more than just voting polls were used. The only logical conclusion from that argument would be to rule they are also null and void and unconstitutional as a matter of law. And further, to address the notion that laptopping is or ought to be unconstitutional, laptopping was always allowed until 2012, where it was then partially disallowed just on purpose, meaning that the election and previous election results would consequently have to be null and void if you were to rule that. My main point, judicial branch, despite these good intentions, and here's the thing, I want to actually make it clear that I believe that last year we had a situation where the Senate intentionally attempted to try to take power from the judicial branch. And we had third-party rulings, and we had weighing in from all sides realizing that you can't do that there are checks and balances in the system, and the judicial was not given theirs, right? This year, and I think this is unintentional, because you know I can almost agree with your intent to create a more fair election. I honestly can. I think that's something we have in common. But taking that authority to usurp and contradict legislative powers of Senate to set the rules and regulation, that is something that is beyond the scope of judicial power. That contradicts statutory law set by Senate. And I think it was brought up previously in Article 7 of our Constitution in Section A, where you know that the Senate is the one that sets the nominations, the procedures of all elections, and then the Elections Committee is the one that carries it out. Even if judicial branch were to make common law regulations, which I believe are legitimate, ultimately it's Senate who are able to override judicial common law by implementing statutory law. In America, that's how the legal hierarchy goes. Judicial common law, statutory law. I just kind of want to make those two things a little bit clearer. Thus, judicial branch, you must prove that your call for a re-election is because of irregularities or the inappropriate application of the current bylaws or elections code, as applied, as it says in the bylaws, the elections director, the elections committee, and the executive director. Essentially, the call for election can only happen if you believe the existing bylaws were egregiously broken by those administering them. What it cannot reside on is your evaluation of current bylaws as a matter of public policy. So believing that you didn't include laptopping, you ought to have, and so therefore we're going to change the rules of the game so that way we kind of reflect our own intention. Your intention is fine, and you know what, we can even have that discussion of intention, but changing the rules of the game is something that is explicitly, expressly in the Constitution left up to Senate. So I'll even concede the right to call for a re-election. However, it is also pointed out in that Article 7 that the regulations for a new re-election would be determined by Senate. So the new regulations would have to be determined by Senate. Senate can still legislate to allow laptoping in the re-election if they wish to set any regulation for that matter. But they voted to remove the clauses that, for instance, they voted to remove clauses that restricted voting to only polling stations. Because Senate, by the express powers written into the Constitution, are the only ones who are able to set the rules of the game, this current call for re-election, because the re-election would then have to be set up by the Senate and they would still allow laptoping, it would be the same process all over again. It essentially would be a moot point to try to call for a re-election. Senate can go through a legitimate process, and this is where I think our solution can be. Unlike last year, the Senate can go through a legitimate process to amend and update the bylaws to further clarify and make clear the meaning of verification. Frequently I heard the word certify, and certify is not mentioned. And to interpret verify as certify is not the same thing, and it would be a false equivalency to equate it as such. Verify means to come out and agree that the numbers are the numbers, and that someone isn't walking out saying, this person got 1,000 votes, this person got 10,000 votes. Verify just means that you agree on the numbers. It is not to indicate endorsement or a certification of the results. We also would have to compare and clarify the meaning of fairness and integrity, the maintenance, the highest interest of the students. I know that's actually mentioned right here in your opinion. That it should be, it has always been understood, it's the faithful enforcement of the bylaws in an unbiased way. This would be the ideal. Judicial opinion, and I'm going to restate this, is that it cannot simply supersede legislative acts. My talk is about process because I think this is a very important point that needs to be heard. You've heard the emotional talks of what it would do to students. You've heard the impracticalities of how it would affect finances, of how it would affect the stigmatization of our association as a whole. And now I also want you to consider that this is ultra vires, the unconstitutional overreach of power that is not within your branch. The difference is, I don't believe you did this intentionally. Actually, quite the contrary. I kind of admire what you were trying to strive for because you don't like coercion, you don't like violation of privacy rights, and I would agree with you. The way to do that would be to update the elections code.
There's a motion on the floor.
Move to extend time.
Is there a second? Seconded by Kathy. All in favor? 401.
I'll give you an example. The Supreme Court ruled in 2013 that it is unconstitutional to ban gay marriage. That became the law of the land. If Congress afterward were to then pass a constitutional amendment saying that marriage is defined between a man and a woman, that would supersede the Supreme Court's opinion because that would become statutory law as opposed to the common law the justices came out with. So they derive their power from interpreting the Constitution. The same thing applies here. I'll even give another example. If you and I were to play a game of Monopoly, and then afterward I was to say, you having 4 houses on Boardwalk is really created an unfair environment, therefore we're going to have to replay the game where you can't have more than 2 houses. That would be essentially me saying, I didn't like how the rules were set, we therefore need to change the rules and then replay it. We must not make the same mistakes that last year's Senate made, who decided they didn't like the election results and they wanted a different outcome. This year, it is not ECAB or the Senate that's acting. It is really, and I want to say this because I think that we can arrive at a solution for this, and I think that there is a way for us to set it. So I've even actually conceded your right to call for a re-election, but also understanding that the ability to set the regulation is defined by Senate in Article 7, unless you feel that article doesn't exist, and understand your intention to call for a re-election. So what I urge for consideration is understand the consequences and process of what you're deciding. Okay.
Would you like to respond?
Was there, I mean, I have a couple things I can respond to, but was there a question?
There were multiple embedded, but I'll let you just respond.
Okay, all right. So for one of the points you brought up is the legislature again allowing laptoping is we can't go against policy instituted by the Senate. You're right, can't. However, it's that section on us verifying the results, which you're right, it says verification. I'm going to address that in a minute, so just bear with me for a second. That at the end of the day, that section was put in the elections bylaws by the same body that the Judicial Council at the end of the day would verify the election's results. That was for a reason. If it was supposed to be just a rubber stamp signature, it would be in there. Or the elections director and the executive director could handle it, as I believe it's been done in the past. But we were added to that section. And to go along with that, your point on verification versus certification. You're right, it does say verification. However, the subheader that it's under says certification. It's at that point it becomes an interpretatory thing, and if you'd like to bring a case to judicial on the interpretation, that is your prerogative. But I really think that is what the intent of the bylaw is it's for judicial to verify and certify the election's results, to make sure, as you said, the numbers were correct. And then also, to make sure that we weren't having, unfair elections.
Because there was no question, we'll move on to Summer.
Sorry, I actually didn't have a question. I just wanted to apologize because I guess I made an assumption about judicial that you all hadn't reached out about loss to me previously, and I didn't know that whole process was going.
That's what I'm here for.
Moving on, did you want to respond further?
That's
Then we'll move on to Melina.
All right, so couple questions. First off, I did want to reiterate on the key point that I know that there's been misunderstandings on. No one has seen the elections results so far, and so certainly, this I would say is very different than a political movement or a political coup to try to overturn the results. So no one knows. No one has seen them. Lori has not seen them. None of my elections committee has seen them to dispel any rumors.
Thank you for
So first at that point. And absolutely, I do think that there's a very easy way to perceive that. But anyway, let me hurry on. So I, again, believe that you are all coming from the best of places possible with this. Couple things that I would say though here. Putting the student interests first, and doing this as democratically as possible. If we were to pull a poll of the student body and get their opinion on whether they wanted a revote or if they were satisfied with the current elections process, in tandem with a poll or a survey rather of the candidates themselves, asking if they felt that either, if they were satisfied with moving on, considering that you're saying that it was creating an unfair advantage for certain individuals, for certain groups, getting a feel of whether the candidates agree with that enough that they would desire a recount, since they would be the ones that would be being put at a disadvantage. Gathering those two pieces of information, would that be enough to move forward with this elections process?
So, but just to clarify what you're asking, it's if there was a survey of the candidates, whether they thought that there should be re-elections, correct?
Yes, gauging on whether they felt that that was enough to create a significant disadvantage for they themselves.
I don't think that survey would be very valuable, no, to the Judicial Council's opinion. I don't.
In addition to the survey that I stated at first, the former survey of getting the student body.
Oh, okay, I missed that. Okay, in that case, we would definitely take it into consideration. It would be something I'd have to think over. As I've thought over for this isn't something that I just woke up and decided I'm going to not verify elections today. This has been something that we've been thinking over for a while, so I'd have to see the survey, look at the participation of the students, and we'd have to think it over and discuss.
So then.
But I think if you wanted to do that, then I would encourage you to do so.
Yeah. Well, because part of it is that I need to be able to gauge what his answer is.
If that's what the chair wants, that's fine, but I'm also fine answering them one by one.
I don't really like the back and forth, so
Okay.
if we could just have all the questions and then maybe you can take note. That way everyone
Okay.
has a chance to speak.
Okay.
All right, so then just following along with that, then that's the course of action that I would like to take. Or as opposed to that, I would like to go to a third party in which, we're all pretty confident that the position we're coming from is the proper position based on the documents. If we are to involve a third party, again, this is not to include administration, but rather a parliamentarian or a lawyer, for us to all agree to whatever decision is followed from that. But if you are okay with the poll and using that as justification for moving forward with this verification, I want to make sure that we have specific standards set, such as how much of the student population responds to the poll, what is the percentage of approval, what outline can be used would be satisfactory for you all.
If I can answer, I think that would be something that you and your council would have to sit on and understand. Because for me, for that survey to be valid with me, I need to know that the student body understands why we're not verifying in the first place, which is the situation on the ground. So I think that conversation we can have, and I'm pretty sure we're all willing to have. So I don't think we can decide on it right now.
I'm not saying right now, but I want to, put that idea out there so that at least the students know that if we do have this conversation, then that's what's going to happen.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a response to that, Hayden, or can we go?
I was about to say the same thing that I was going to say. I will be in tomorrow if you'd like to discuss anything. I mean, I think that it's something we would have to discuss. We'd have to look at anything, and it's. As we had at the meeting between Judicial and Elections Committee, I'm uncomfortable giving situations where in this specific situation, okay, that, I would do it, because at the end of the day, it is a personal decision. So, we can definitely discuss that further.
Next on the speakers list is Shafi.
As a member of ASUCR, I still do not understand why you didn't talk to any senators or President Pro Tem Corey Willis about your concern about laptoping. I get that Molina did talk to you like an hour before that meeting, but you still had a chance before election began to address this to Senate. But you or none of the judicial branch, members of the judicial branch, have addressed any senators or any or the President Pro Tem Board. Because ultimately, it's not the election director nor the election committee that decides the procedure of the election. It is the Senate.
Does that conclude all your questions?
Yes.
You're right. It is the Senate that, at the end of the day, approves it, and it's Mr. Willis, who's the President pro tempore and chair of the Legislative Review Committee, and it's the LRC that passes through it. But at the end of the day, it's the Elections Committee and the Elections Director that originates the legislation, and I have a strong belief that the LRC and the Senate listen to the Elections Committee and the Elections Director as the authority on elections. And I think that that's good. I think that they should do that. They are our elections authority. So I think that the best influence on that would be with the Elections Director and the Elections Committee. I think that maybe there should have been more conversation about this. I'm not going to say that there shouldn't have been. But this is what we have to work with, is what happened now.
Next on the speakers list is Taylor.
Hey, a couple of things. First off, the person who just stepped in is starting taking minutes for us. He's Marty Martinez. He's the parliamentarian for ASUCR. He's supposed to be the standing authority on our governing documents. That's one of the reasons why we asked him to be here today. Secondly, I also just want again to restate that how grateful the justices are here, especially on a Sunday night. I know it's an issue that's important to all of us, and to see you all here again to talk to us and hear our concerns is very comforting. I had a couple different comments. Again, I wanted to talk about, I can't say this enough, on different practicality or impracticality most of about holding another election would cost. From the finances to lower student voice to the impossibility of passing any student referendums to the impossibility of getting another re-election within 15 days of the polls. And then to reiterate again what my colleague Vice President Irvin said, or at least to talk a little bit more about the different arguments the judicial made in the elections update. Shall maintain the highest interest of students. Put simply, I don't think I have a re-election that does that. And anyway, we can go hear our concerns and work towards a solution that I think at least we can work towards something besides a re-election or an outright re-election. I think it's something that we should talk about.
Does that conclude? Sure. Would you like to respond to it?
Sure. And I hear you about the practicality and cost. I've discussed this with our elections director about, how much that would cost. As you said, the couple $1,000s for the polling stations. You have to have the additional weeks on the website. It's probably going to cost roughly $4,000, and then promotions if we're choose to go down that road to get people out to the polls. I do understand that it is going to cost money, and that there is a pretty high chance of none of the referenda meeting the 20% turnout. However, we did discuss this. We discussed this here on Friday, before we released this, and at the end of the day, it just really came down to we're not going to stick the student body with elections that we don't think were fair, and that's just something we're going to need to work with. We're going to have to do the best we can to make it happen, even though it's it may be costly, it may be difficult, it may be a burden on some of us, and I understand it's going to be a burden on Ms. Reyes. I mean, quite honestly, it's like it's going to be a burden on some members of the Judicial Council as well, because elections are going to continue. There are going to be more violations report. I'm here at 10 p.m. and I have a midterm at 9 a.m. I mean, we are feeling the burden of this as well, but at the end of the day, we decided that this is what we need to see to ensure the viability and respect and fairness of the ASUCR. And at the end of the day, these people that the candidates that we can't be sure of an election that was fair, there are serious doubts whether the elections are fair, are going to have a pretty significant budget at their disposal. They're going to be controlling all of ASUCR next year. I mean, they're going to the elections that have struck out, on at least the Judicial Council, and I'm sure many members of the student body at large, are going to have a long-lasting effect, not just next year, but for a very, very long time.
Thank you. And then we have Michael. Oh, but first, sorry. I'm going to open up the speakers list one more time by Summer Taylor, anyone else, and then the speakers list will close. Shakti? You're on there. So we'll go Michael, Summer, Taylor, Shakti, and then we'll move on to
this will be a bit of a Q&A.
would you be able to consolidate all your questions and then have him respond at the end?
Not exactly, but it's real quick.
It can't be like a back and forth kind of thing.
I just wanted to get quickly, so Article 7 regarding elections, Section A, election rules and operations. The procedure for the conduct of nominations, campaigns, and elections shall be determined by the Senate. Do you agree with that statement?
I don't have the Constitution in front of me.
I'm
sure, I trust that you do. So if that's what the Constitution says, then I can't disagree with that.
Okay. So we agree that provision is there.
Yeah.
So I suppose it would be, the next statement would be that we agree then that means that Senate sets the regulations on elections, the conduct of elections. So if we're calling for a re-election, Senate would then set the conduct for that new election, by which I mean the nominations, campaigns, and elections as determined by Senate. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so if we agree on that Senate, even in a new election, would be the ones to determine the terms of the new election. Senate still decides to allow lot topping in the re-election because that is their legislative right as expressly written in the Constitution. What would be the point of having a re-election?
Well, if Senate keeps laptopping on the table and we have another re-election, then what's going to happen again is it's going to come back to judicial. There's going to be massive reports of coercion against against the students, and it's basically it's going to be a giant episode of deja vu. We're going to not verify the results again and back to square one. I mean, that's why we issued the recommendations for a new election. These are the requirements that the Judicial Council decided under these situations would be able to verify the results.
Oh, it's a recommendation.
It's a recommendation.
Okay.
And
right, that was just my last point. So it's we agree that this is a matter that doesn't pertain in the elections code or constitution, laptoping isn't anywhere mentioned, right? We've been kind of talking about that. So the article in the elections code, actually, Joe brought it up in part 4, item 1, section 9, subsection 1, which is that the right to enforce existing regulations for matters that are not contained herein shall be left up to the discretion of the elections director. So if we agree that laptoping is a matter that wasn't included in the elections code, therefore, that would put it under the express written power of the elections director to decide how to arrive at solutions, which I believe halfway through the week, she consulted with you all on being able to establish guidelines as that solution, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if we agree that the matters not contained here in the elections code were decided by a consultation between you two, then I fail to see what unconstitutional action was taken, because there is only one mention of harassment in the Constitution, and it has to do with discrimination. That's the only one.
If I could respond, if you were paying attention to what Joe was saying, he was saying that actions that any of you all take can be up to review for constitutionality.
Right.
And so we feel that laptoping, whether legalizing or illegalizing it, was up to review to the Judicial Council. And in Joe's opinion, he said that he felt that that was unconstitutional.
Where in the Constitution?
Where in the Constitution?
Where in the, yes, please. We have like 5 copies of it, you can borrow one.
Let's see. It's
Where in the Constitution would laptoping be considered unconstitutional?
It would be up to the interpretation as a behavior or an action that the board takes.
Does that conclude?
That's all the questions I have.
Then we'll move on to Summer Schaefer.
Yeah, so first I just wanted to say that I strongly, I hope and I strongly urge everyone, especially the new cabinet, to respect the chair and Robert's rules of order. And also, I had a couple questions. So I forgot to ask you the first time. You mentioned you thought there were no other solutions, so I just wanted to come back to that. Also, something that's been coming up quite a bit is matter of public opinion versus democracy, or like special student interest, or like how students feel and student interest versus like democratic process and the process versus private one. And you could argue that like the interest of the student, the best interest is to have a democratic system, so I understand that. But just to kind of separate those two really quick, because there, like you were saying, given like there's a lot of burdens that will be placed on students, and so it might not be best interest of the students, but it might be the most democratic thing to do in your all opinion, like in the branch's opinion. And so I just wanted to bring up the fact that some of the repercussions of the burdens that are placed on students could affect the democracy and the power that students have in the future. And that's just something that I really hope you will consider moving forward.
Would you like to respond?
Sure. And the point that there are no other solutions. Maybe that was that before I heard some of the, the ideas here. So I mean, I think that there would be open to solutions that would go ahead and, and allow us to do that. But I guess my thinking is that, I mean, it's pretty, at this point, we're Judicial Council. I mean, I'm sure you won't argue, is the branch that sees most of what went wrong with elections. And in fact, I mean, I feel like that's a it's a pretty depressing job sometimes. We only do anything when something goes wrong, and I think that at that point it's just especially that we're the only branch that's saying this. I mean, I think that us also seeing the worst of everything. I think that that's what it comes down to. So maybe that's where that came from. And then for the interests of the students, versus democratic process, I appreciate you really looking into that and kind of we're analyzing that. And I think what you said about the democratic process being in the best interest of students, I think that is where we're coming from on that. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to Taylor.
I don't like repeating myself on a broken record, but I just want to say it really clearly. First, again, we're arguing again that the first line, the Judicial Council shall maintain the highest interest of students. Again, I don't think city election does that. And I don't think I'll need to restate what the different constitutionality, different arguments that Melina and Mike are making, or the principles of whether or not this helps students. that like Summer just made. But I am going to say again that you mentioned that from your numbers, having an election cost about $4,000. That's more or less the number I got it to from what information I have. We have about $2,600 in the ASUCR Electricity Fund. Again, I don't know how much the election director has in their fund, but I'm assuming since election season is over, it's mostly empty. Meaning that we do not have the funds in this board to run another election unless we pull into whatever reserve account we have. Yeah. And I can't stress enough again that this board spent, well not this board, sorry, ASUCR spent enough money to get $28,000 in red coming into here. A lot of new programs the last couple of years. But again, money we simply do not have. And after the question, because my question is this: how do you propose we have a re-election? Like financially, feasibly, or like again within the time frame? Because if we hold one after the 15 days, I could easily argue that's we're breaking our own election code and Robert's and our Constitution. Knowing that this board, I believe, no one official wants that either.
Does that conclude?
Yeah, again, I just like thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So I take your interest of students' comment and I wrote it down, and with all the other interest of students' comments, and I appreciate your comments. As to how we're going to afford, you did mention the reserves. Elections are pretty much one of the very first priority things that ASUCR has to do. Elections are a top priority. We can't operate without having elections. We wouldn't have an ASUCR next year. If that's the only way to proceed with elections, that I think would definitely be something we would need to pull out of reserves for. Those are the reasons why we have reserves.
Thank you, David. And our last speaker for you meeting is Shafi.
My question is that when would you propose re-election would have to take place? What weeks?
But it's, that's whenever, as soon as possible, whenever Senate can, get it approved, and as soon as possible.
Thank you, Hayden. Daniel, would you like to come and speak? Okay, so we have 6 minutes for meeting, unless someone decides to extend time.
I'm basically going to reiterate what fellow justices said, and just to kind of add to the point that this isn't something we took on this quarter. It's not something we took on fall quarter. It's something we took on since the end of last elections, because we know it was a problem before, and we know that moving on, this is what the Judicial Council would like to contribute to AS to make sure that student voice are represented here, now, and henceforth. So I hope that nobody sees it as an attack on your party candidacy positions. And then I would like to also continue with trying to find a solution atmosphere we have right now. I understood what Michael was saying in his speech, question, whatever that was, that the Judicial Council does have this power to call for re-election, and it is up to the Senate. And then, so those recommendations that you see or conditions aren't legislation. These are just the things that we would like to see for us to verify, certify those results. So it is up to the Senate. You don't have to do all that we say in those recommendations. It is up to the Senate to do as how they please on how to finance or redo this election. We'd just like to say that these are the conditions that I would like to see to make sure that the student voice is represented. And this is not, someone mentioned judicial activism. This is not judicial activism at all. We're not taking any political stance on it. Like Melina said, we haven't seen any results. So there's no personal or any personal influence in this decision at all. So I'm basically here to answer any other questions about logistics. I understand that there is a reserve, so those financial, I don't know exactly how much. If you have that number, I'd like to hear it, of how much is in the reserves right now.
We have money in the reserve, but however, you cannot take it out for elections.
Saying that election is number one priority, and since the judicial is calling for it, I think that it is Senate's
So pull up
prerogative
the speakers
to.
list, if that is easier. So
Okay.
then on my speakers, I'll start with Shakti, Michael, Summer, Melina. Let me write that down first.
According to the current bylaws, you couldn't do it. That's why actually, you cannot just take money from the reserves. I have already talked to our financial operating manager, about possibly taking some more money out of the reserves, and she said that we cannot. And that's why one of the reasons I have done a budget cut earlier this year is so we have more money in contingency.
So there's no way you can get money out of there.
With the current bylaws, no.
So what's the point of having a reserve if you can't get the money out when you need it?
That's the direct question.
Okay. Well, it's meant for, hold on, I'll look it up. It's meant for things like if we were to have a brand new office, things like that, like, and that's.
So what's the
but that's according to
procedure?
the
What's the
bylaw.
procedure to get? This is not to be bragging.
Yeah.
I understand that the financial argument, but I think that there is a way through there, and that argument doesn't have a lot of weight to it in my eyes.
Is there a question?
So yeah, I would like to see how feasible it is to get the money out of reserves.
You would have to change the bylaws, and that's one of.
But so the bylaws doesn't allow you to get money out of reserves at all.
Yes, we do, but it's for things like I said, like if we were to build a new office. So the last time we had taken out of the reserve is $79,000 to build this new office in ASUCR. That was the last time, and that bylaw was in there.
$79,000.
Yes, but it was taken out from the reserves because to build a new office, and that's the bylaw.
So
if that bylaw is changed, which it has to be changed by the Senate, then we can talk about taking out of the reserves, which then you have to come to the finance committee to propose this, and yeah, so there's a process to this, and
Ian, would you like to?
Yeah, forgive me, but section 15 of your bylaws says the ASUCR shall maintain sufficient reserves to ensure day-to-day operations for a minimum of 1 year, and expenditures from financial reserves must be approved by Finance Committee and a majority of the Senate. Unanticipated one-time expenses that are necessary and vital to the operation of the organization may be allocated with a 2/3 vote of the Finance Committee and a 2/3 vote of the Senate. So forgive me, but I don't see.
Looking at the same thing.
Yeah, I don't see how how that bylaws don't allow currently for them something to be as important, necessary, and vital to the organization to be taken out of the reserves with approval by the Senate.
well, the point is, our finance hearing will be Friday, and I don't think its time is going to be efficient. The timing is not sufficient enough to make all of those changes or to do those. And to also say, if judicial was to call for re-election, I would have suggested them to do it sooner than like after election, and especially after a week after election. So if you were to call for re-election, I would have suggested to do it maybe by Wednesday when you saw those complaints coming, and to be like, hold on, let's stop, let's hold on election, let's figure this out, and then proceed. Because if you want to go through finance hearing will be this Friday, and then you have to then go to Senate. And I do not think there's going to be sufficient time to have all this procedure approved, to have election within 15 days.
So then it's not about the
Daniel.
May I have my time extended by a member of the...
Yeah.
Oh, we're out of time. Okay, motion to extend time by 15 minutes. 30 minutes.
Motion to extend time by 30 minutes. Is there a second? Second by Summer Schaefer. All in favor? 401. So Daniel, you could always respond back, but unless you ask a question, we need to move on to the next speaker, which would be Michael. But
Okay, let me kind of respond. So, this re-election is vital to his survivability and legitimacy. Honestly, to be legit, you need a certain voice. So I think that whatever the Senate can do and whatever Finance Cabinet can do to ensure that, first of all, those 15 days don't max out, needs to be done. You don't have to have your finance hearing on Friday, have it on Monday. You don't have to find a way. There's a way through the bylaw. There's a way to ensure that you get the money. There's at least $79,000 if it's, and what we're saying it costs us about $4,000. So there's definitely money there So that finance argument, I think we can throw away for now. We can listen to the student interest arguments, and trust me, we've been through that. We've been delivering from the end of last elections through the summer about that. And we just feel that this cannot keep happening. The Senate needs to understand that laptoping is an issue, and they need the right legislation to handle it. And so that's why we came up with those conditions that the Senate, the judicial branch will only verify results when these conditions are met.
Moving on to Michael.
Just to reiterate where I'm coming from with these questions is really to try to strive to find common ground with this. And I think it doesn't really need to be said, but that I don't invalidate or I'm trying to undermine exactly your perspectives or opinions, just trying to arrive at exactly how we can find common ground with this. But I wanted to say this by giving another example that hopefully gives context to what this precedent sets. And it's, say for example, this year the Senate voted to include campaign finance limits of $100 per candidate if you're in a party, $400 if you're independent. Say next year Senate decides to strike that down, saying, you really can't enforce campaign spending limits because people do fake receipts, yada, yada, yada. And then that election we get complaints of overspending, disenfranchising, less affluent candidates. So by using actually the exact same verifications of the Elections Code of Constitutional Article 6, Section D2, you could say that creates an unfair environment and that it, you refuse to verify unless we have a re-election held on these counts and there's a strict spending limit that is absolutely enforced, and you come up with a solution to do that. Now, does that seem to strike to you as a good precedent to set?
Maybe the others understand exactly what you're trying to ask, but to me what it seems that you're asking is that in this situation, would we do the same thing?
You're right. I'm trying to give another example.
Well, okay,
It's
well,
the same justification.
To me, what it seems, because I've been on council for 2 years and I haven't seen any campaign finance violations. So what it seems to me is that as the rule stands right now, it's fair. I'm just my personal opinion. I probably need to do a little research, but we haven't seen any campaign finance violations, so we won't be seeing that as an unfair advantage because there's no complaints or unfair environment.
Do you believe
so
it could happen?
The way the rules are set up right now, it's not happening, so I don't think it will happen.
So as I mentioned before, please consolidate ECAB your questions before they're sent to our speakers.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's not a question that you're responding with, Daniel, then we'll move on to our next speaker, which is Summer Schaefer.
Yeah.
Do you have a question? Daniel?
Question for someone?
No, do you have a question in response to that?
No, I'm trying to understand what you were trying to say, but it doesn't seem that was the situation.
Yeah, I can clarify a little bit. My belief is that the precedent that's set from this is that there will be different issues that come up, and maybe we haven't thought of what all of them are at this moment, but I believe that there will be different issues that come up as we regularly update the elections code, update the bylaws. There'll be different complaints, and I think we can agree that the language is vague enough that you can use it to sometimes support contradictory positions. We could say that shall maintain the highest interest of the students, we need to ban laptopping. Shall maintain the highest interest of the students, we need to allow laptopping. I could equally justify both those claims using the same language. So we could agree that the precedent that is set, I could use multiple issues and find a way that shows that what ends up happening is that by refusing to verify the election results, and I don't believe this is your intention, but what it effectively does is it holds the election results hostage until legislative demands are met, and that I believe that the legislative demands need to be something that's up to the legislative branch, if that makes sense.
So me and you both agree that laptopping is coercive and unfair, correct?
I have that argument. Yeah.
So is that against the student interest?
I believe that would be a matter for student conduct to handle, not the judicial branch.
In your personal opinion, do you think that that is something that's not in the best interest for students?
To be honest, I don't have an opinion one way or the other.
In my personal opinion, I think that that is something that students would not like to see. And so that is the opinion that is extended to the rest of the judicial branch, and that's why that opinion came up. So that would extend to any other situations that we see that might come up. For example, if campaign finance is becoming an issue, the judicial branch will reevaluate whether whatever the constitutionality of the issue is, and then we'll proceed from there. So this is just progress. all of judicial branch effort is to make AS and transparency and whatnot fair and just for the student body. So it might not come up now, we're not saying it will come up, but when it comes up, the judicial branch will handle it accordingly. So you can't say just because we made a decision now, that affects everything. No, it's, do you understand that? It comes, we'll handle it as it goes.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, so we'll move on to summer. I'm sorry, there's a lot of confusion. So Jonathan will now be taking minutes. Yeah.
No, I'm.
Okay, summer is on the floor.
Cool. So yeah, I just wanted to keep this solution based. I think one of the main reasons why we had this meeting was to talk with you all and get like kind of. I think we've gotten a way better understanding now after hearing some of you speak, like what you were like, what your thought process was and your reasoning was, and so I really appreciate that. And I just wanted to get, you know, like maybe coming up with other solutions or creative ways that we can address this problem, because as we saw last year and as we can probably anticipate, this is going to affect all the candidates. It's going to be, as we acknowledge, going to be burdensome, and so there's going to be a back and forth regardless. And I just want us to remember how important the student voice is, and I think that came up with almost everyone here. Like I think everyone here can agree that student voice is the center of the importance here, and so keeping that is what we should be most concerned with, is making sure that that's here. And the back and forth between students and the possibility, bringing in possibilities of third parties is a scary thing, because it could affect the power that students have, the voice that students have in relationship with ways that we need to get things done on our campus, the way that we decide what we need as students. And so I just, I want to hear what other solutions you have. I know you mentioned that there were ways that you all thought about for the 20%, to get to that 20% with this, but is there any other solution that we can think of? Because I know that this most dramatically affects the referendums, because there is a very, very slim chance with this re-election that any of those would pass, giving them a disadvantage overall. And so if we can like keep the student voice and focus of finding solutions, and work together on that. Anyway, I just wanted to hear what you were wanting to mention about the 20% and then any other solutions that we could all come up with together to address this.
Okay. Some of the recommendations that I personally had, this is not the opinion of the whole council. For example, the more than one polling site. So for example, having polling sites in the dorms operated by volunteers. And one way I think that volunteers can be attained is a lot of clubs on campus require volunteer hours. I know specifically for the 3 clubs I'm in, they require volunteer hours, and just an easy way to get those hours if they work for elections committee. So having polling stations in the dorms, in all 3 of them, one at the bell tower, one off campus at the UV maybe, and just having at the rec center as well, having visibility, I think can help you increase those numbers, the 20% number. And not only this, but now that the way the council is seeing it, this forces candidates to be able to express what their values are even more, because then a student will be more motivated to go vote instead of being coerced to vote and whatnot. So those are kind of the solutions or recommendations I personally had. I don't know if that answered.
Did you have a question?
Did you want to follow up or something?
I guess what I was asking is there any other solutions that were thought of?
Other than the re-election?
Other than the re-election, or in conjunction with that, yeah.
There's not really any other thing than to recount the vote, to me. I mean, do you guys feel like there's any other thing than recounting? Hard to say, I don't think there is.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our next speaker, Melina.
All right, just a couple things, and I'm gonna go in essentially kind of backwards order here to address some of the things. There can't be elections business on campus housing. And so to have multiple sites like that, especially on campus housing, is not only impractical in that I would require dozens of students for every single hour of the polling day, including a member of my committee there at each location at every hour. To do that with less than 8 days, or what is that now, 7 days, to make the 15-day deadline is completely impossible to be able to coordinate that level of multiple polling locations, to make it feasible to get a bunch of students to get that 20% turnout. I can guarantee, like, no matter how many, that just won't work. On top of the fact that I did reach out to students to offer those volunteer hours, and I still had to bring my husband in to volunteer every single day at the polling location. So even with that incentive, I'm still not pulling in enough students as volunteers. So that's one issue. And then working backwards, as far as the timeline to be able to get things approved, first off, I would say, after having one member of Judicial Council say we couldn't meet earlier to make this decision because we had to meet Friday because we're students, I think it's very tough to make that as a justification. And I'm not doing this as an angry jab at you, but it's difficult to use that as a justification for why this decision wasn't reached earlier, and then state that Finance Committee needs to meet earlier to meet that requirement. I'm not finished with my concerns. And so assuming that Finance Committee, because they are students, is not able to meet prior to Friday, that would mean that week 5, this Friday, we would need the vote for approval for pulling that money out, which I agree the justification is totally there, so I'm not saying that the money is not there now. But Friday it would need to be approved. Then Wednesday of week 6, it would need to be approved by Senate. Assuming that Senate does not refuse this, then that leaves me as week 7 as the earliest that I could absolutely confirm getting this election site up and up to standards, having the volunteers worked out, everything there. Week 7 as being the absolute earliest. And so that is a huge timeline that's now looking at. That's extending the elections well beyond the point of what they should service and multiple deadlines. On top of the fact, it completely eliminates the point of why there was only a 3-week election season, which was to allow students to be students first and to get their midterms taken care of and papers turned in. So my question is, considering that that is the earliest feasible deadline, how are we even able to make that work constitutionally and by missing those multiple deadlines?
I'm gonna go ahead and start with, I think that Judicial Council, you've been on Judicial Council, we've used the greatest effort to meet as conveniently as possible. We've met at midnight, you understand? We've met, last week I think we met twice to handle cases, 2-hour periods. So we know what it takes to meet. Like, I understand that you might have got the wrong impression from what the person said, but we understand what it takes to meet. And if it's your due diligence as your position to make sure that AS functions right, just as ours. So it wasn't a job that you should meet on Monday or not. It was just, I'm letting you guys know that it is feasible. Don't be stuck on Friday. And then continuing for what you said about those deadlines, those are some things that we probably need to sit down and hash out more. I don't want to give you a definite answer as to, you know, oh, this can happen, because I would have to see how you work and whatnot. So we're willing to sit down and hash those out with you. We think that it is possible, so we're willing to work with you on that. So that's all I have to say.
Well, can I respond to Most definitely, it wouldn't be able to get onto this next, well, I mean, unless we were able to have a meeting tonight and figure out everything tonight, it wouldn't be able to even be sent to Senate to be able to be voted on, even assuming the Finance Committee was able to meet before then. So there is no way for this item to be brought up, so much as I
The
understand.
re-election item?
Just to respond to that.
To go on what is that?
Senators can call for an emergency meeting, but there's an hour that they have to do it before, and I know that's the same for finance too. 48 hours.
48 hours.
That's how it was for this meeting, calling it Friday evening for Sunday evening. So Daniel, would you like to respond to Melina's statements?
Basically the same thing. I think that it's possible and we can hash it out.
Since there's no question, we'll move on to our final speaker, Taylor.
Hey Daniel, good to see you. A couple different things. I want to follow the VPA's track of thought. I'm going to talk about any other possible alternatives to calling an outright re-election, because we already heard about the arguments against constitutionality, arguments of like lowering of student voice, as well as the argument of like financial or just the impracticality. So again, I want to talk about a couple different things from like different ways to keep the student interest that we all value so highly, but like besides just the election. So maybe anything from allowing the referendums to go through, or allowing referendums just to be voted online. Or maybe, I'm still just spitballing here, if we allow for online voting, but allow for no, or not allow for any campaigning on campus. What else? Multiple sites is a good idea, but again, I want to stress how much logistics and thought needs to go into that. That is just people power we don't have. ASUCR is a fairly large organization, but unfortunately a lot of them are kind of involved in the elections process, which makes it unsuitable for polling sites. Anything in between an outright election, I am open to talking about.
I may have forgotten the list of solutions you had, but one of them you stated that you wanted the referendum to be split from the candidates.
Yes. Is that
that's
all
something we would have to talk about? I don't think that, in my personal opinion, I don't think that it should be separate, but that's something that I'm willing to change my mind on that if it's possible, but that's something we'll talk about and see.
Well, it's not a bad start.
I think that have to be approved by UCOP as well, because, I mean, separating it, and that's a process.
I don't think we can pick and choose which results to adopt.
Yeah, I don't think that you can, and we won't be validating just referendums and or separate from the candidates, because that doesn't sit right in constitutionality. So, if you can go down your list of solutions.
Yeah. What about? If you don't mind me to go back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
I think, I don't remember which justice was earlier mentioned. Maybe we could allow for online voting, but just no campaigning whatsoever on campus. Is that something you would?
I mean, I think we all know that laptoping happens on campus too, so I don't think that would be.
I would hope at least I would argue that it'd be a little harder to enforce, or sorry, a little harder to, what's the word, to enact off campus. Lots of different places, more
right,
closed
so
doors.
it would still be unfair and coercive. So what we're saying is that just no laptoping at all. Make an environment where the possibility of laptoping doesn't even exist.
If they were a laptop, if a student was going to laptop when it was on campus, I'd probably do it off campus either way.
So we want an environment where you can't have laptoping at all.
Is there a question there for Taylor to respond to?
Yeah, he just asked me to go into the different ideas
Oh.
I had. Yeah, I think the last one was. Again, I guess the last one was the one you already touched upon, multiple polling sites. But again, I just stressed the practicality and the logistical impossibility that the director stressed. And I have a chance that
can I?
When we send out another mass email, ask volunteers. Again, I hope that we see just as long as anyone else who can there as well.
Of course, I'm down to volunteer.
I'm gonna hope to do that.
According for the residential halls, I think it was that you can't have campaign materials, or is it elections committee as well? I'm not too clear on that. This is a question for Linda.
Summer, would you like to answer?
Yeah, so housing stays out of elections any way possible. They're
Okay.
very imperceptive to any elections.
Yeah.
Just out of my
Melina was ready to answer.
I can illuminate a little bit more about that. That rule was actually designed to explicitly prevent the harassing of students in their homes, essentially, or what equates to their home currently. So yeah, it's that's why the campaigning and the active campaigning is not allowed there. Campaigning materials are not allowed to be posted there. You know,
Okay.
certainly.
Do you think
And
that?
Summer will respond again.
Sorry. There's also an MOU, so there's a memorandum of understanding, if you want to look into it more in depth, but between housing and ASUCR, there's like certain rules and regulations, so there's like an actual document. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so scrap the housing then. What about in different colleges?
Again, you're asking me to coordinate dozens of volunteers, literally every single hour. And so when that's turning, I mean, even if I'm having students that are volunteering over multiple hours, that's still dozens of students at each day that I would have to coordinate along with my polling director. And I have to have a member of my, of my committee there to supervise, to make sure no laptops are being taken, to make sure that the rules are being followed. That's a massive mobilization that you're asking me to undertake. And even with the expedited process, in a week, in 2 weeks, even if I got the email out tomorrow, with the lag that it has between students getting back to me, logistically, not only is that a nightmare, I simply don't see it as feasible whatsoever.
Okay, I mean we'll be sitting down, hashing it out. So.
And because Taylor was the last on our speakers list, you can save the last minutes for your remarks, but that is all good.
I think that all that is said is already being said. So I hope that there's no animosity. This is just.
Thank you to the Judicial Council for joining us tonight and for speaking with us. We'll move on to public comment. So this is the portion of the agenda where anyone in the galley can respond to anything that was discussed today. So does anyone have anything to say for public comment? Yes.
Can I? Yeah.
Yes.
Tomorrow.
All right.
Well, I'm really glad that we talked about all of these issues. Just one issue that we didn't really talk about, and it's come to my attention that the whole discussion has been centered around laptopping, and that because of laptopping, the results, haven't been verified. Whichever way you slice it, laptopping cases are accusations which, as we know, convey the possibility of untruthfulness and sabotage. These claims rarely can be substantiated, and it can rarely be determined whether or not individuals are seeking to sabotage another individual's or party's candidacy. However, there was another case presented to judicial in which a particular group of individuals were cited for a blatant crime, a blatant misuse of ASUCR office information. Now, I'm just curious as to why this hasn't been discussed at all today, or even brought up besides me, and maybe someone else just mentioned it in passing. I'm curious as to why that hasn't been discussed, why there wasn't a verdict that was reached, or if it was reached, why that verdict wasn't made public, because this was a case that was heard, and according to my knowledge, the defendants never received, or the people associated with the case never received an answer or a verdict. And we also haven't talked about whether or not the individuals who were involved in this case are even eligible to assume office prior to the decision issued to have re-election. So I'm just wondering why that wasn't talked about, why this verdict wasn't discussed at all today, and whether or not the people involved in that case actually are eligible to run, and why this wasn't decided or talked about prior to calling for this re-election. Also, another comment I would like to make is that although judicial, I guess, is within their right to call for re-election, I believe this should have been discussed before it was put out publicly in an email, because now the students have a conflicting view of what's going on. And both parties are automatically, whether or not judicial intended to do that, I'm sure they did it with best intentions. That's been proven, I guess, throughout this discussion, but it paints both parties in a very negative light because it automatically makes both parties look like they did something wrong without there being, evidence for that. So my first question was, what happened with the verdict in the case that was discussed? And the second one is, why wasn't this discussed at all before the email being sent out? Or why couldn't we have this meeting and the email be sent out after? So.
I saw hands for response from Melina, Daniel, and then Joe. So you may.
Right, actually, I think that's really excellent that you brought that back up because, at least on my part, that topic and that issue, at least how it pertains to this meeting, completely forgot it. And so, I think it's very, very, and I'll totally acknowledge that. I think it's very, very good that you bring that back up. So thank you for doing that very necessary reminder. And I actually share a lot of those same concerns because as elections director, I didn't get any notification on any decision made on that. I got no notification on any punitive actions that might have been taken. And so to also hear that the students that were part of that case didn't hear anything, I'd really like to know where that case stands because a decision should have been made on that and should be made public after the appeals process is exhausted.
If I may ask them a brief question, just.
Next is Daniel.
Okay.
So they'll
You
answer
can
the
answer my
question.
So just because a case has been opened and the referendum was public, so like you said, once the appeal process is exhausted, then it becomes public.
So it just hasn't been exhausted?
So it hasn't been exhausted.
Okay.
So we're still deliberating, the evidence is still being pondered, and the case wasn't dropped, and we didn't drop it to say, oh, we want a new election. No, the case is still open and we're still being discussed. And those decisions will obviously come out whenever the judicial mission meets and appeal process has been exhausted. So just because you didn't hear anything doesn't mean it's dropped.
I didn't say that, yeah.
If you hear something, you hear whether it's been dropped or whatever actions the judicial branch takes. So I hope that clarifies.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say, we're still looking into that one, so you can ask them, but that's not a question that they can answer. And so any decisions in terms of what would happen to that case would fall on our branch. And so, our meetings are open to the public, so if you're really interested, you can go to the meetings at 5 o'clock in the conference room on Fridays. So, yeah, that was my comment. Or in the Senate chambers. But, yeah, we're still looking into that, so if you're interested, show up and then, yeah.
Just
And then, sorry, you can continue.
to clarify, because I think the verdict for this case would be important in even considering whether or not to pursue re-elections. Because if there are members of the party or the entire party, I'm not aware of the entire scope, so I don't want to talk out of thin air. But
Appreciate that.
yeah, I'm not aware of the whole scope. But if there is a possibility that these members are disqualified or unable or ineligible to run, or there's a significant amount of strikes against the party, I think that should be critical and that should be ascertained before we go into the re-elections process.
Just so we're clear, this is not the board that would.
No, I'm just, I don't know who to turn to, so.
You can turn.
Okay, yeah.
Taylor and then Daniel.
Since we're all here, I actually wanted to clarify. I don't know if it's the right form. I'm sure you can please correct me if you think it's not. Would any of the justices or election director mind clarifying how many strikes the parties have? Because I think AJ or does bring up a good point that it's something that should be taken into consideration.
Daniel.
And since of course we're all public, I believe.
Right. I believe that your side, the party has 4 strikes, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
It's
4 strikes with.
The way that we tallied it is that they have 6 strikes.
Right.
However, because the 5th and the 6th strike occurred during elections week, the party still assigned them, but they are dispersed as 2 strikes.
Right.
One for the 5th strike being during elections week, and then the 6th strike also occurred then to all of the candidates.
Yeah, I was going to get into that. So your side 4, and all the candidates in your side have 2.
It's,
Correct.
I I think it should be set as 6, because if
Okay.
another strike were to be assigned for an action committed in week 3, so let's say they, for some reason, got a 7th strike, then that would be dispersed again. So I don't think it's
Okay.
proper to say it as being 4, because that leads to more mix-ups.
Okay, so 6, and then candidates have 2,
Yes.
and then with the exception of a candidate with 3.
Yes.
Orange Party has 2.
Yes. And then one individual. has-
One candidate has 1 strike. As of now, without hearing the case that you're referencing.
Right.
Does that clarify all your questions?
Yeah, that pretty much
I
answers.
I think you're pointing to the fact that the case would affect the re-election, but
I'm just
I
curious
think
if
that-
it will. I'm not saying it will, but I'm just curious if the outcome would be different, or I think it's something that should have been decided and then go into re-elections personally,
I
because
think that if we had done that, it would have been even a worse light, seeing that it would feel like we were political motivated to go against Orange Party. But the reason why it wasn't even, the Judicial Council will have came to the same result with or without that case. And even though that case has some implications on the results, it doesn't have anything to do with why we call it a re-election.
I'm not saying it is. I'm asking because either way, I think it looks a little strange, because like the cases that were against the other party were either dropped or solved or handled, or there was a verdict reached, but there was no verdict reached on this one, and we just went straight into re-election.
The verdict hasn't been reached yet.
Right. That's what I'm
Melina's
saying.
going to also respond.
So.
Right.
I would just also like to make a note, I guess, to everyone, though, that the decision of this case does have impact on the implementation of a re-election. If a candidate or a group of candidates were to be removed, then that means the site has to be according to that. If that case were decided while the voting is out, then that means that there's a potential necessity to withdraw candidate names, which can't be taken out during the actual voting process, which then means that the votes would have to be subtracted afterward, which leads to messiness and then again questions the validity of the results. So I would just have to emphasize that this case, if there is going to be a revote, this case needs to be addressed yesterday. Because that's not, again, not a critique on you, but it's to say that, like, for the implementation of this, it needs to happen soon. Because if it's not happening soon, then it has big impacts on the next election. So, just, expediency.
Oh, that was the extent of my questions and concerns. Thank you.
Is there anyone else for public comment? I forgot to mention this for yours, but there's a 3-minute limit unless ECAB extends it.
Hi everyone, my name is Shami Cole. Just to kind of follow up with some of the things that my person was saying as well, was I believe with the allegations that were against the other case, it violated FERPA laws, which is not only a violation of elections code, but also like an issue of federal law as well. So I think that should be given the priority over elections code, and should be kind of warrant further conversation and basically firm action, because it does present a seriousness as well as an urgency because of the fact that it has issues with federal law. But basically what I just wanted to say from like the entirety of this conversation was a lot of things have been said constitutionally, from an emotional standpoint, as well as logically. I mean, when you look at everything that was said, I feel like there is no real way to have a re-election in the future that is actually tangible, that can actually happen from a financial standpoint. Also, as a candidate and someone who's reflecting a lot of people who've run in this election, personally, I do not believe that any one of us can go out there again and want a full re-election for the sake of our mental health, for the sake of who we are as individuals out there. I have already, and many other candidates as well, have sacrificed things financially, academically, personally, and we don't believe it can continue. We've all put our passions, invested our time and our effort and our energies out there, and a majority of us have talked, and we believe that the elections that have happened, we were okay with. So I feel like for the most part, I really plead the executive cabinet to consider not having a re-election, to holding off on any decision of actually making a re-election, because it would not serve in the best interest of the students. As a student leader on this campus and a reflection of other students out there, they're already disinterested, and I feel like having this controversy of having a re-election would only push students farther away from ASUCR and getting involved. And as a student leader who wants to bring students into this space to make real change on campus, this will act as a direct detriment to those students and to the students of this campus. And I feel like I really plead and I urge the members of the ECAB to reconsider this decision and to make sure that a re-election does not happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Thank you. Is there anyone else for public comment? Okay, so we'll move into roundtable and announcements, beginning with Melina.
Pass.
Michael.
Pass.
Jonathan? Pass.
I love seeing everyone here, especially as so many people interested in ASUCR. I'd just like to again announce that Senate meetings are at 6 and ECAB meetings are at Fridays at 4 and 5. So you'll all be here. It's always just as much fun and fun.
My finance hearing will be Friday, 4 to 5. If you want to make an appointment, you can make an appointment at front of the desk, and they'll help you out. Thank you.
Summer?
Just in case any of you didn't know what it was, because I saw a bunch of looks of confusion, I'll just read basically what FERPA is. FERPA generally prohibits the improper disclosure of personally identifiable information derived from education records. Thus, information that an official obtained through personal knowledge or observation or has heard orally from others is not protected under FERPA. So it's just saying unless you give, you're an official and you give information that's private to an officer, that's protected. But if someone else gets it that isn't just protected information, that's violation. So.